Welcome back to part 2 of the first impressions video of the Aerosoft Twin Otter Extended. You remember we did the startup and taxi, showed you some of the neat features like the automated checklists on this, which are very cool. Now we're actually going to take off, and there's more neat things to look at. You need to manage the engines on this quite carefully, and you have some help here. I'm going to show you here. Let me go back to index. If we get into performance tables, this is where we're managing everything down here. So for our climb data, so we're going to be climbing up to about 9,000. We're going to be climbing at about 95 knots, a climb rate of 1,625 feet per minute, and it's going to take us about 6 minutes to get up to our cruise altitude of 9,000 feet. Once we get into the cruise, then what we're going to do is reduce our cruise power to 91%, which is down here. Now this RPM dial down here is kind of unique. Well, not unique, it's different. It doesn't actually show you RPM, it shows you percentage of 2,000. 100% here is 2,000 RPM. I don't know why everything just spun up. Let me make sure I'm in idle, which I'm not. There we go. So we are going to be looking for, as I just said, 91%. Now 91% is about there, which means that we also need to have 42 pounds per square inch of torque, which is about there. So the way you do that is once you get up there, you're reducing power first, then reducing the prop pitch to set the 91%, then bring the power back on to set the PSI, the pressure, torque pressure there. That's how we need to do that. Must not let the T5 temperature get into the red here. That would cause the engines to explode. I do have failures turned off, but I'm not going to fly it badly, or try not to anyway. So that's pretty much it. Let me just go back to the index, and we'll go back to our takeoff checklist here. We know flaps are going to come up at 400 feet. Flight controls, check they are free and correct. They are. We're all good there. Transponder, let's turn that on. That is on. Landing lights are on. We already did that. Strobe lights, kind of weird in that you flick them up. They are on. Caution lights as appropriate. We're good. Runway and heading. We're on runway 5. So we'll check our heading down here. Here we go. There, we are on 5, so we're all good there as well. Next checklist is after takeoff. So at 400 feet, flaps up, auto feather off, climb power set, and away we go. Now let's just go back to the index and look up climb power and all that stuff, or performance tables I should say. Okay, so previous page, we're basically setting our power to achieve that climb, but we don't want these engines red. They are going to go red a little bit for takeoff. That's probably wrong. It is a first impressions video still, so bear with me if I do screw that up. But once we get above 400 feet, we'll reduce the power a little bit to take them out of the red, and everything will be good to go. I'm going to leave this up. In fact, no, I'm not going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. 91, 42, that's all we need to know. Good. Alright, clear for takeoff. It is very twitchy on the takeoff roll. Auto feather just armed. Saw the light come on. Alright, there we go to go. Pull back on that yoke. Up we get. There is no gear retraction. Oh, we want to be climbing at 95. So nose up a little bit more. My VVI is looking good now. I'm going to reduce the power a little bit now. I just don't like the engines being that hard. Not that much, Froogle. A little bit windy here today in Glasgow. Not getting my climb rate too well at all. Alright, flaps up. We're above 400 feet now. Let's turn those taxi lights off, which is that one. Turn those landing lights off as well. We're VFR. Let's turn round to our heading. Oh, letting it get away from me already. That's more like it. Coming up on the 95 that we want now. That ping was the altitude alerter, telling me I'm at the altitude that's set into the alerter, which is a default of 3,000. I'm not bothered about that right now. I should set that to about 9,000, which I will do shortly. Alright, let's fix that speed once again. Again, first impressions video. I'm not going to fly this like a pro, but I'm not going to fly like a complete idiot. You know, we can probably reduce now actually to the 91 and 42 now, which we'll do. So let's pull back on the power here. Pull the props back. Pulling the props back will increase the torque on the engine. Oh, we need to turn auto feather off at this point. So props back to 92. There we go. Engine torque is good already. Let's climb from here, 95. Wonderful. It actually flies very, very well. It's a very hands-on aircraft. It's very much a break from the norm if you're used to the tube liners. Looking at the GPS there, we're to the right of our intended track, so we will get back on track in a little while. Now we can arm these things now. Arming heading and arming the altimeter. Altitude hold, sorry. A little bit over my climb speed, 100 knots instead of 95. So our rate of climb, you can see, is less than the intended 1600. That's fine. Got an hour to go in this flight. Obviously I'll probably cut it, not make you sit through the whole hour. And there it is, all trimmed up nicely. Look, hands off now. And if you watch closely here, these needles, you'll see them fluctuate a little bit. Real aircraft do. They're not like a rock. Which is why I like this. Now I'm going to turn off track IR for a moment, because I know some people don't like it when I record track IR. See, I listen to you guys. Coming up on 8,000 feet now. As you would expect, the higher we go, the more our rate of climb lessens. Alright, 1,000 to go. So we don't want to give the autopilot too much work, so as we come up on the 9,000, I'm going to trim this for pretty close to straight and level. The autopilot does use the trim to manage altitude hold. I just don't want to give it crazy amounts of work to do. Alright, so nosing down a little bit now. It's going to cause our speed to pick up. Turning on course. Little flight director bars there. Right about there, see them? Very cool. Very basic, but still very cool. Power's dropped from the 42 that I want. I will fix that in a second. Not really bothered about it now. There we come up on 9,000 right now. Alright, nose down, trim it down. A little bit of nose up trim, went a bit too far there. Let's just turn this on. And we're on. Heading an altitude hold. We're on track. Holding our altitude, we're all good to go. Go hands off at this point until we get to Barra. Let me show you around the cockpit. So here's the primary instruments, as you would expect: airspeed, navigation down here, artificial horizon here, slip indicator, turn indicator here, VVI, altitude, very, very standard, basic, reassuringly basic. The engine instruments are not that hard. There's your torque there. There's the percentage of 2,000. So NG there. I forget what this is. I think it's turbine. I'm not even going to say. I was going to say gas, but I think that's probably wrong. T5 is our critical temperature. We don't want that to go into the red. It's actually getting pretty high right now. So what I'm going to do is going to bring up the indications here. We can go 75% at 1650, or 75%, which is 1650 at 42. So we'll do what we just did. We'll reduce the power. And prop pitch back down to 75. Which is right about there. We'll go a little bit higher. And then we can bring our power back up to 42. Looking at the chart there, that's telling us that at 9,000 feet, our fuel flow is going to be about 260. That T5 temperature is still pretty high, isn't it? Some bright spark is going to tell me how to fix that. I'm not going to worry about it too much. At least it's not red. I did see somebody else do a video on this, and they were flying everything red all the way, which was just stupid. Let's see what that does to our speed. Speed's dropping down. Since that T5 temperature is staying pretty high, I'm not going to worry about it too much. What I will do then is put us back where we were. Excuse me for being a noob. I know some of you are screaming right now. The engine's back up there. Come on up again. Alright, and bring our power back up. Having a problem with my left power lever. I do tend to fly with individual levers to match the aircraft, so I do have 2 prop levers, 2 power levers. Sometimes by virtue of them being at an angle from where I'm sitting, it's hard to judge where they need to be. I'm going to watch that T5 temperature. I think I'm okay. Alright, so there's our engine gauges, radio stack you already saw, and that's pretty much it for the cockpit. First officer co-pilot has his own set of gauges down there. There's a flight data recorder, which is neat. You can record the flight and then output it to Flight Data Keeper or Flight Keeper, whatever it's called, from Aerosoft, and replay your flight, which is nice. I keep saying neat, I'll stop saying neat, which is very nice if you do have a problem with the aircraft, and if you have Flight Keeper, then you can fire up the data recorder and see exactly what was going on with the aircraft at the point that you had a problem. Getting a little bit off track on our course, I'll fix that in a second. Let's pop open the checklist and see if there's anything that I've missed here for our cruise. After takeoff, here. After takeoff, oh, we didn't turn the yaw damper on. Let me do that. Now it's on. We're all good. Nothing to do really until descent. So while we're cruising along, I'm just going to adjust my heading a little bit. Bring us back on track a touch. There. So while we're cruising along, let me pop outside. There it is. Welcome back. So we are 16 miles out now from Barra, which in a 737 would be terrifying. In a Twin Otter, not so terrifying because it's so slow. So we're going to start our descent now. I'm going to take it down to about 2,000. I've already looked at the performance charts here. Let me bring these up real quick. And I know that my landing VREF is 75. So that would be right about there. I'm going to keep an eye on that as we come in for landing. Let's just go back to the checklist. We'll run through the descent checklists. So descent, fuel quantity selector is good. Fuel quantity is good as well. Yep. More in the rear tank than in the front tank, which is fine. Slightly nose up attitude because of the weight there, so that's all good. Hydraulic pressure is good as well. Caution lights, we don't have any. De-ice, we don't need it. Altimeters are already not set actually. Let me go and check the altimeters. At Barra we have a wind from 340, so we're going to land on runway 33, and altimeter should be 1028. So let me just whiz up here and do that one. It is 1028. Strange that it wouldn't accept that. Oh, it's taking it now. Okay, good. So now we can start our descent. So what I'm going to do is just take it off altitude hold, reduce power, and trim this nose down a little bit. We want a fairly good descent, say about 800 to 1,000 feet per minute. There is Barra up ahead, I think, here. Now the problem with landing in the Twin Otter is typically for a landing you adjust your speed with your pitch. So if you want to go faster, aim at the ground. If you want to go slower, aim at the sky. You adjust your rate of descent with your power. Now there is quite some delay, as you've seen, between feeding in power and the engines responding. I just had a warning ping go off, which is probably telling me to reset props. Very hard to see here actually. Yep, because I changed power so much it wants me to reset the prop pitch. Whoa, a bit too crazy on the descent there. We just trim this for its descent and then we'll reset those props. There we are. Done. Actually wants me to go full prop pitch, which I'm not going to do, so I'm going to accept that warning light for the time being. Just 7 miles out now. We may have to circle the airport and enter the pattern rather than fly straight in, because this does not want to descend. Reduce some power some more. That will bring the speed off. You can do quite steep descents in this. It is a STOL aircraft, so short takeoff and landing, so you can come in with a hell of a rate of pitch, which is why you do see these things landing in St. Bart's and places such as that. We're just going to have a 20-degree flaps landing, nothing serious. It is quite a long runway at Barra. It's about 2,700 feet. There's runway 33 right there. We are really quite high, so we are going to test the descent here. Push it down to 2,000 feet per minute here. Pull back on the power. Got a pneumatic low pressure just because I've come off the power so much. So we are going to circle around. We'll enter the pattern. Oh, there's British Airways telling me to check in. Let me go and do that. That's how they track hours for their pilots. Alright, so let me enable track IR so I can get a look around and see where we're at. Okay, so if we take 2,000 feet and do a left pattern over those hills out to the little rivers here, we should be good. So as I was saying on the landing, because there is such a lag between entering power and the engines responding, you do need to plan ahead a little bit. You do need to be quite cautious, I guess is the word, in managing everything. You can't expect to just spool up the engines if you get a little bit too low. So despite everything I said, you probably will see me nose up to shallow the descent, whereas normally you would increase power and hold a constant pitch. Just going to fly off here, then we'll turn left over to that peak, 2,500 feet. Let's turn the autopilot off. And we will level off at 2,000 feet. little bit of nose down trim there, just to keep our descent going on. Still at flight idle on the engines. Let's turn left now. Nose up trim now. Left rudder to keep it coordinated. Watch that altitude. So we'll just fly out to that peak there. And then we will turn to heading of 120, which should be almost a reciprocal of runway 33. We've got our speed down nicely. We are at flap speed right now. Just going to bring it up a touch. Keep my altitude up. Kind of got away from me a bit there. Alright, landing lights on. While we're doing this, let's look here. Approach checklist. Landing lights on, which are good. Your damper can go off on before landing. Flaps need to be set. Prop levers full forward. Well, we're not there yet. Now you saw earlier on when I reduced power that you reduce power first, then reduce the props. The reverse applies for putting it on. So increase the props, then increase the power once we get to that point in the flight. Let's bring this back up to 2000 if we can. Nicely trimmed now. Watching my speed, doesn't get carried away. There's the peak. Let's start a left turn now, round to 120. It's very tempting in a simulator to look at dials all the time, and I'm guilty of it as anybody else. I'm doing it right now. It's a good idea to try to practice, especially if you want to learn how to fly. Practice looking out the window, looking at that picture. You know, what does the angle of the horizon look like? And then what does that tell you about what the aircraft is doing? Is it descending? Is it climbing? Practice, practice, practice that. It will pay off in spades when you get into a real aircraft. And it's just good airmanship as well. The problem with a simulator is you don't have feeling. You can't tell from the seat of your pants if you're climbing or descending. Okay, so that's not a reciprocal course, is it? Silly Froogle. Check on my diagrams here. Yes, runway 33. Seems off. Never mind. Alright, so we're going to fly out to that little island and turn left to the island up there. Well, not island, landmass. It is actually an island though. And then we will turn finals. Watching my altitudes, climbing a bit. Back off the power. Can afford to let the height come off a little bit now. Down to 1500. A little bit less power. Alright, first stage of flaps, so 10 degrees of flaps. There's the runway. Yes, I got it wrong. We're not landing on 3.3, we're landing on 2.9. Frugal mistake. I read my chart wrong. Alright, let's turn in. 20 degrees of flaps. And start our descent now. Finals. No lights here. It's purely visual. I'm a little bit too high, I think. Twin Otter doesn't require a long runway because it's a short takeoff and landing aircraft. It can stop in no time at all. Let's come off that power a little bit. Get down to our VREF of 75. Nose really wants to come up. Just anticipating there that I'm going to pull the nose up and drop some speed, so I fed in a little bit more power. That's what I was saying earlier about thinking ahead with this aircraft. A little bit fast on the speed, but it's a Twin Otter. You don't need to be precise. You need to be close. It's a pretty sturdy aircraft. If you look on YouTube, you'll see plenty of videos of people doing crazy things with this. Not the sim, the actual real aircraft. Right, 300 feet. Coming up on 200 feet. Should be minimums. We are landing. Backing off my power a little bit now. A little bit of ground effect there. Courtesy, I think, of AccuFeel. Or it was a gust of wind. Alright. And power off and a slight flare. There we are. So we're at flight idle now. I could put the reversers up, but we're going pretty slow. Just let that speed bleed off a touch. And we can turn off. There doesn't seem to be any terminal building here. That's the end of this video. So in the next one, we'll actually be flying back from Barra to Glasgow and flying one of the VOR DME approach to runway 5 at Glasgow, which should be a lot of fun. Use a lot more of these instruments and do things a little bit more by the book, but still first impressions. As I said, I made a bunch of mistakes, and I'm sure I did. Don't be hating on Froogle. It happens. It's a first impressions video to give you a feel for this aircraft. As always, my name is Froogle. Thanks for watching. See you soon.